We're live, apparently. Now, this is a short bit because A. James has got to go, and B. We just spent an hour talking, well, over an hour, talking about things which you'll see later, but we need to talk about everything else which has gone on. So, welcome to this disjointed extravaganza. What has happened? Castleford are world champions. Congratulations, Castleford.
Could I just say the best picture of the weekend was from the Greek Grand Finals? I
all
don't know if anybody's seen it, but AEK Athens won the West Division of the Greek Domestic League, and AEK's fans are all ultras, and it's the first time I've seen pictures from a rugby league game with flares and fireworks going off.
That's because they're banned here. Don't encourage it.
But no, at the end of the game, not during the game, not throwing on the pitch during it. But what a great picture to see the AEK players going over to their fans and being absolutely feted in the traditional way. It was a great image anyway. If you haven't seen it, look it out on social media.
I know rugby league's rubbish anyway because everyone hated Castleford and Leeds. Said it was a boring game and stuff. So don't need to talk about it, do we?
There wasn't a lot to talk about.
Although I
thought Castleford were particularly dogged in their defence and got exactly what they deserved.
That Ralph coming on this?
Well, he's got to be employed somewhere.
I mean, Carson says, "Good evening, gentlemen and Richard." That's not very nice, is it? From Wakefield, it's not bad. Hooray, says Andy. I mean, apologies, we are only here for a short time, but you will enjoy what's to come later. What was your highlight of the weekend, James? If anything.
Oh, my highlight of the weekend. I only watched the two TV games, and I'm trying to remember which they were. Castleford Leeds.
Saints Hull.
And Saints Hull. Yeah, I thought the Saints Hull game wasn't a bad game actually. And I don't think people would have expected the performance that Hull put in, but I thought the overriding sentiment from the Castleford Leeds game was that ultimately the team that won it wanted it more. I thought that, not suggesting that Leeds didn't want it, but I definitely thought Castleford were playing for Andy Last, and they're putting a performance that obviously the fans were wanting to see for a few weeks now. So. And I think it shows with Hull what you can do. As Hull FC fans know, they can be inconsistent. So the challenge is for them now, as Tony Smith said after the game, is maintaining that standard of performance into next week and the week after and the week after that. And that's the challenge, isn't it? Whilst they didn't get the result that they perhaps would have liked, the performance was there.
It was a massive turnaround, though, wasn't it? From losing by 60 to virtually being a knock-on over the line away from beating the champions.
Yeah, and how does that change in 1 week? You haven't coached the players in a week, and by and large, that for me is about attitude. And so, I think they would have had a bit of a soul-searching discussion after that resounding loss against Salford, and the players demonstrated within a week how they can turn it round. So I think if you're a Hull FC fan, I think you've got to stick patient. They've got a new coach in there. He's not going to change things overnight. As Warrington saw last year with Darryl Powell, it can take a while. I think the understanding is, again, at Hull, I think similar to Warrington, they've got a significant number of that squad off contract. So, to some extent, players may be playing for a contract, but that can become unsettling, can't it? But who do they play this week?
Hull are at home to the Lee Leopards.
So, that's not going to be easy, is it? Lee with their impressive win against St Helens a couple of weeks ago. I obviously didn't see any of their game against Warrington this week, but that won't be easy. But back at home, hopefully with the crowd behind them, I think that's
the one
important.
thing they've got to get the crowd behind them, because I think they'll come sceptical.
I think they will, but I think the performance they put in at the weekend would have helped it. So hopefully the crowd can get behind their own players. And they put in a similarly good performance.
Big blow for Leeds, Phil, because not only has Cruz Leeming decided he doesn't want to be a Leeds Rhino anymore, which is fair enough, but now James Bentley, his understudy's been suspended for this week, so he can't play against the Catland Dragons on the telly.
No, I think we need to pay credit to Castellan and Warrington, because I think, as we were talking about earlier, that you do have dips in the season, and I think we've got one of them at the moment. The first 2 rounds, maybe 3, there's the excitement of the new season, there's new players turning out in the colours, crowds are turning up, bands beforehand, you've got all that feeling of everyone's got the same opportunity off the starting line. So you get a boost at the start of the season. the weather's still not conducive to the best rugby. The clocks don't go forward again till this weekend, which makes everybody feel a little bit better that spring is in the air. So rounds maybe 3, 4, 5. The standard does tend to drop a little bit. It is a little bit more 5 drives and a kick. I think we saw with the Salford-Wakefield game yesterday that, again, I wasn't there, but I listened to the radio commentary. It was a tough listen because clubs then 4 or 5 weeks into the season, they've focused predominantly on conditioning during the close season, not maybe skills. That first month of the season has taken a lot out of the teams, and the standard drops a little bit. So I think for Catalan and Warrington to still be unbeaten, the only 2 teams that are, and even Steve McNamara saying after their game that he felt his team hadn't played well, but they've come away with an important home victory. I think we're now starting to look at maybe the second phase of the season, moving into Easter, and hopefully the standards will pick up a little bit, because I just think the last couple of weeks the product hasn't been as good.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, but it's a 27 round competition, isn't
Yeah.
it? It's a long competition, and once you get over that honeymoon of the first few weeks, realisation sets in that, this is here till October. And so, as people will always say, the competition's not won in the first few weeks, it's won towards the back end of the season. That's
But you can
true.
lose it in the first few weeks.
That's exactly what I was going to say. You can lose it, and getting off on the wrong foot, suddenly you're under pressure. But, I think, as I said last week about Wakefield, I thought there were positive signs in their performance against Leeds. That must have been the case yesterday at Salford, albeit I understand Salford weren't at their best. So it is about, even Catalan and Steve McNamara's comments, coaches will be saying that at this stage of the season. You're not going to expect them to say that was an all-round performance, perhaps with the exception of St Helens when they went down under, because teams will lift themselves for a single major game like that. So it is about building week to week and about building on performances. But if you can chalk the results up, it eases the pressure at this stage of the season.
Mark Sneeder's now kicked winning drop goals in Golden Point against Wakefield with 2 different clubs, which must be the first player to do that. I was at the first one because that's when I was working at Wakefield, which tells you how long ago it was. But yeah, 14-13. Oh dear. Wakefield 0 from 5. But Fencing are 6 from 6 in the championship, so it balances itself out.
But you've scored.
We scored some points. So hopefully the Wakefield fans did.
I think the one thing about Wakefield that we do know is that their defence is pretty solid. Apart from one aberration at Wigan, they haven't been really overcome when they've played. Their defensive structures are pretty solid, and that is something you can build on. Attack will come. The problem they've got is that they've lost too many of the players in the spine that would help them score points, but I think their defensive resolve at Salford was what kept them in the game. And again, we talk about Hull have gone from conceding 61 week to very nearly beating St Helens. Salford have gone from scoring 61 week to not being able to put too many moves together so that inconsistency at this stage of the season is there, apart from Warrington and Catalan.
Yeah, and consistency is often a word that's thrown at referees, isn't it? But you see that with the players. The players aren't consistent, the teams aren't consistent. So to expect that equally match officials will be consistent as well is perhaps an ambitious target. Referees themselves will have dips in performances across a season that lasts months, not weeks. But yeah, I mean, you talk about
another 8-point try though.
Well, there was an 8-point try this weekend.
But in the St Helens game, should there have been an 8-point try?
I'm trying to remember what incident you're
When
referring
he
to.
knees him in the
Yes.
in the act of scoring.
I can't remember that one.
I think it's been mentioned in the disciplinary minutes that perhaps that should have been an 8-point try.
I'll have to go back and look at that one. I have seen the 8-point try in the Warrington game, and that looks on the face of it, the camera on the far side, it looks, he does hit him high in the process of going over. That's what an 8-point try is there for.
Which was in fact a 6-point try because he didn't get.
He missed it. Yeah.
So we have to think of another word for it.
That players have the nude run at the end of the season if they don't score. I do wonder whether this is the referee's version of it this season.
We all have to get one in.
Yeah. I'm sure it's not.
We need to ask Kyle Amber what he thinks about that, because he doesn't like team songs. Does he like?
Is that because he can't sing?
I don't know. He's on Channel 4, isn't he? We know people at Channel 4.
Well, I might see him on Saturday.
Well, you'll be there. I mean, I won't be there, but you'll be there. Consistent is what a team doesn't want. Consistent is good for refs, says Andy. I wish Wakefield were consistently good, but you can't have everything in life. What else has happened?
Result of the weekend: Wigan's
I
wheelchair
was gonna
beating
say,
Halifax. I know we're big fans of the wheelchair, but that was a surprise. The defending champions, who were ahead at half time, and Wigan were dominant in the second half.
Great photo of Deck Roberts scoring a try, not in the paper but on social media if you want to see it. He does look very happy. He looks as happy as he was at our table at the wheelchair awards the other week. Elsewhere, Leeds beat Warrington in the Super League, and London Roosters beat Hull FC in the Super League games this weekend, which kind of just randomly appeared. And Wakefield didn't lose by 100 in the Women's Super League Championship thing this week. That's a positive. Teddy Ruxpin says Brixton Bulls are having their first ever Masters game at Aldershot-on-Fleet this week, Saturday, up the Bulls. See, that's a London-based team not named London. Named after an area of London.
Big fan of Brixton and what they do. They're great with young kids. But then that's why I think you need, and obviously it become a topic of conversation with our guests, I'm sure, you need a focal point in London, and that focal point really has to be a Super League club, and that young kids have to have an aspiration to play against St Helens and Wigan. And London's academy is struggling at the moment. The reserves are struggling, and I think that's because maybe we just haven't got the right strategy for London at the moment. But I do think others wouldn't agree that London is a fertile ground for us. We just haven't done it properly, so we shouldn't abandon it. We should actually do it properly.
You know, if a League One club had to pay a Championship club £400, hypothetically, to borrow a player, how much of that £400 do you reckon a player gets a week in the Championship? Just a hypothetical. We've got to go. Well, James has got to go. Do you want to stay and talk for a bit longer, Phil, or do you want to go?
There's Tunnock's caramel wafers. I'd stay for as long as that.
Because I feel the Championship people get annoyed if we don't stay on for a bit longer. But thanks for coming, James. People will think you've only been here for 10 minutes. then you'll disappear, and then you'll come back on the second. It's complicated. It's complicated this week, but.
Well, thank you for having me. I'll take my
your reward,
caramel bar, and thanks for your company.
If we mention them enough, do you think they'll sponsor us?
I mean, I've tried on social media. They used to sponsor a football tournament, which was.
We'll keep going. That's the sponsorship that if we can bring that into the sport, we don't need AMG.
Dumbarton got to the final and everything. But we lost to Total Network Solutions.
All being well, see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week.
Basically, we spent an hour and longer talking to the owners of Keighley about their plans, their dossier for rugby league. So it went on longer than we thought. You'll see that after, once they're ready, but on the podcast it will come after this bit. Cruz Leeming.
Yes,
he's become the world's greatest hooker this week, which is interesting because I'm not saying he's a bad player or anything. I mean, I'd probably take him at Wakefield if we could afford him, but we can't. But some of everything's overhyped to within an inch of its life these days, and so much as he's obviously a very good player, fringes of the England squad for the World Cup and whatever, but coaches strangely don't always agree with their predecessors, nor fans, nor chief executives about how a player should or shouldn't be played.
I think he's clearly frustrated that he isn't the first choice hooker, that when he's fit he isn't the starting number 9. It just seems strange a month into the season that he would deem that he's going to get that opportunity of starting somewhere else. I mean, clearly in Super League we're bound by a pretty restricted salary cap, so I'm not sure there's too many clubs at this stage in the season that would be able to allocate money to buy him unless they wanted to do a player swap. So you look at the clubs that maybe are deficient in the hooking department where he would get a start, there aren't many. So then there's talk of his agent will get offers in the NRL. He may well, but will he be the starting hooker in the NRL? I would venture to say he might if there was an injury to start with, if somebody's looking for a hooker at this minute, because again the salary cap is different over there. They could afford to invest in an import player who wouldn't cost them very much comparatively speaking. They need them to go into the first team straight away. He would do a job for them, but then you'd have to say, well, in terms of the longer term, would he be a starting hooker in an NRL side? My guess is probably not. So yeah, the timing of it is really strange. He had the whole pre-season with Rowan Smith. He clearly had the mass disappointment of not being selected for England. I think he felt he'd worked really hard last year, taking his team to the grand final. felt perhaps he should have had a place in Sean Wayne's squad. Sean Wayne didn't see it that way. I think he's then done his pre-season. Season started. Jared O'Connor's been given the start on him. Corey Johnson's coming back fit. Where do I fit in? I think I'll try my luck elsewhere. It's just the timing seems odd to me.
And not just the timing in the season, the timing of it coming out just before the game on Thursday.
Well, I think it had been known about for a couple of days before. I think everybody was keeping very much tight-lipped on it. Players were interviewed about it afterwards, saying that we know nothing about it. I suspect that, you know, when somebody doesn't turn up for training, or when somebody is told that they don't have to turn up for training and they're not there, the players do speak to each other. So yeah, I think the onus is now on him to come to Leeds and say, this is the club I would like to go to. Leeds will then have a decision to say, well, you're contracted to the end of 2024, we are asking X transfer fee, or we would like a player in exchange. It can't be someone on a quota, because they haven't got a space. So you'd think that an NRL club would have to pay a transfer fee if that's where he was going. If it was a Super League club, Leeds may well say, right, well, we won't exercise our right, but we would like this player in exchange. Strange. And a shame, because he's a really, really good bloke.
Yeah, and I guess that does an NRL club need him enough to want to pay a transfer fee?
Again, it depends on the amount of money that you've got and how much he's going to cost you. And if you had to go out and buy a hooker from another NRL club, it's a relatively cheap option to pay a transfer.
So Kevin's on, he knows. Wigan's supposed to be interested. So.
Well, again, I would say at the moment he's not going to displace Sam Powell as a first choice hooker. So is it going to make any difference if he goes to Wigan? Would he start the game? Which is what he wants, unless there's something in the environment at Leeds that he would prefer not to be there, which is eminently possible. Again, it'll raise the question of, and I'm not sure how much a relevant point it is, of captaincy, because clearly he was very proud to be the captain last year. He was very proud to lead the team out most weeks. Obviously, clearly at the grand final he came off the bench, but Leeds aren't having a captain this year. That may be something that he disagrees with. You know, he may want to know one way or the other if he is the captain, and if he is the captain, then that should promote him up the playing order. But Rowan Smith doesn't see it that way.
I think what we need to do one of these weeks is get in someone who's a former Leeds captain who once fell out with his coach, because he might have a
Do
perspective.
we know anybody?
I don't know. He might have a perspective on that. The wheelchair team's got a
May
captain.
have his phone number.
Wheelchair team's got a captain.
Yeah, and an interesting choice of captain, because it's not the England captain.
No, it's Jodie Boyd-Ward. She's going to come on the podcast. You said she would. Leeds, she's got pink hair. Leeds women don't have a captain. Does that mean Amy Hardcastle's going to be the captain, because she's got pink hair as well?
There you go. I think they will have when the season kicks.
Yeah. Season launch next week. Are you going?
I am. Are you going?
I think it's me and you.
Oh, excellent. No wonder they were so keen. So when I said I think I might be able to come, oh, good.
I tell you what,
I don't think it's because
it's
it's
a
us.
good job, because I'm working in Leeds that afternoon, but it starts in the morning and finishes by lunchtime, so I should be able to get from one part of Leeds to another part of Leeds.
I'm sure I can help you do
Fingers
that.
crossed that I can do that. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I don't know what I'm going to ask half the people, because only half the people are going to be, or are indeed, and they won't know who I am, so that's even better. Elsewhere, nothing else really happening.
I think we should pay credit to the unity of Cass. I mean, James just sort of mentioned it, that they wanted it more. I think they needed it more. I think that was a result at home against the big city rivals that was going to...
Their cup final, yeah.
No, not necessarily. I think there was some disenchantment amongst their fans, and the way to win them back is to win that game. And there was... And the atmosphere is hostile to the opposition at Castleford, exactly as it should be. It was a little bit muted in the early stages of the game, because I think there was a fear amongst some of the Castleford fans that this is a game we don't want to lose. We need to get a win on the board. And when they realised that the resolution that their team was playing with was going to bring them that win, that's when the atmosphere that you would expect kicked in. The second half, they forced Leeds to play one-out rugby and mopped it up, and their forwards made twice as many yards as Leeds did. I just think that they needed that result, and they got it and deserved it. And as we just spoke to James about, it's going to be what if they're going to build on that, they have to really play well this week as well.
When rugby league's great, it's great. And when it's not so great, everyone slags it off and says it's rubbish and the standard's crap and we're all rubbish these days, whatever. Do we have too high expectations sometimes?
No, we have too many games.
Too many games.
And we play over too long. Again, going back to what James was saying, and I think that would have been the next question had he been able to stay, was do we get that level of inconsistency because 27 rounds is too much? And clearly, we're all watching a little bit of the NRL at the moment. That seems to be of a consistently high standard. They play less games.
Dolphins.
Big game in Brisbane this weekend. Can't wait.
That's going to be exciting. Championship, Featherstone. I wonder if Mark Campbell was happy with their performance, because he wasn't happy, was he? According to the social media.
Is that him though? On the social media?
Is it?
I don't know. I mean, you can have a fake identity. I'm
Could be one of those AI things.
It could be a bot.
It could be an AI Mark Campbell at Feb. I'm there next Thursday. Yorkshire Schools Cup final.
Right. Have you got anybody playing in that you know?
Nephew's playing for hopefully.
The new Gareth Gale.
Oh, well, I don't know where he plays on the pitch these days. This will be his first. Because they don't play 13-a-side, do they, until they get to school age. But the games are every hour, so I don't know how long the game's going to be. So.
Excellent. Good luck to him.
Well, yeah, I mean.
Who's he playing for?
Is it Freeston? I think they're another Outwood school these days.
Right.
So following in my footsteps, obviously, because they're a great Outwood player of the past. But playing against John Sentimer Academy from Hull.
Oh,
so
excellent.
that's Normanton versus Hull. That'll be a battle in Featherstone.
He's on the big stage already.
Yeah.
Good lad.
So I won't say anything bad about Featherstone. But they won, so they're 6 from 6. To lose 5 from 6. It's actually an interesting game against Widnes, with late scores and drama and controversy and all that kind of stuff.
I don't think John Key was too impressed, was he, on the post-match detail?
Kind of game, I think that would have been a good one to put on the Sportsman or whatever.
Yes.
Because we don't know how that deal works. But Bradford beat Sheffield Eagles. Mark Aston doesn't like Godsall. I think this is a bit rubbish.
Although, again, I think that's a great result for Bradford, because we shouldn't underestimate how well Sheffield have started the season.
4 wins from 6.
Yeah.
That's a good start.
And winning at home as well, which is, again, a good way of getting all your fans on side.
Carson's watching the Batley game. He's watching us after. That's fair enough.
At Dewsbury.
It's just like the olden days when Mount Pleasant was closed. Good luck to Batley getting you floodlights sorted anyway. Halifax beat Keighley. More in Keighley to come. London Broncos, or should it be Wimbledon, beat Newcastle Thunder. And Whitehaven beat York. That's obviously
the result of the day in the championship.
Especially York were 26 on the handicap, so that's not good, is it? But League One, Doncaster beat North Wales.
That's 3 good results for Doncaster, because they played 3 of the teams that they would expect to be coming up against in or around the playoffs, and should we say 3 of the teams from the more traditional areas as opposed to 3 of the expansion teams. So that is another good result for Doncaster. I think it's since Carl Hall became a colonist. The form's picked up.
Hunslet, which of course we're all big fans of here, they won at London Scholars 66-22. Don't think any great surprise there. Dewsbury winning at Workington, that was on the Sportsman. I didn't watch it because I was out. 25-6.
Mother's Day, that's why.
Yeah, and Rochdale Hornets beat Midlands 32-24, but that sounds a close game. 14-12 at half time to Rochdale, so I think Midlands have got plenty to take out of that one in the bizarre competition that is League One that no one knows what to do with. But this week, Cornwall London Scholars.
Okay, so somebody's going to get some points.
Yeah, the O has to go, as they say. Cornwall have played 1 game so far this year.
Sounds right.
Yeah. Oh yeah, because this is an unbalanced league, isn't it? Yeah. So yeah.
And also, if you get knocked out of the cup early,
we mentioned the wheelchair games earlier. I wish I could have seen that Wigan Halifax game. It sounded a belter. What was the score in the end?
59-45.
You got drop goals and everything. So it's
2 French men, one a French international, one an English international, playing for Halifax.
Yeah.
And I think they were intent on starting the defence of their crown with a win, but Wigan are going to be up there amongst it this year, clearly.
Which is good.
Which is great.
As former champions, it's got to be. You've got to have competition. You've got to have teams who can put together good games of entertaining rugby league to watch.
Well, you need a an equalisation of talent at the highest level amongst as many teams as you can.
Your women's side any more players this week?
You can ask
The
at the
mighty
launch.
Valkyrie. Yeah, the Valkyrie. The going on.
They've made Sinead Peach captain.
Yes, should have been in the. She was like the female
Cruise
cruise
leaving.
leaving.
Yeah.
But
Hooker
far
that-
more controversial.
Hooker that didn't get selected.
Yeah, far more controversial. We're going to get back to Mickey McAlorum again. Is there any more news? Apart from all the going back to Boundary Park, that's, I guess, good news, I guess. I don't know, but at least they...
I think what we're going to probably talk about with the guys from Keighley, who are almost publicly dissenting voices. We may find out that they've got more support than we think. Everybody's talking about grading. I know that we sort of mentioned it last week, and we need to see how that plays out. My only concern, and clearly we've no idea what they're going to say, is that I think they are purporting a position that harks back to a different era. I'm not sure it's going to address the issues as they currently are for the sport at the moment. And I would hope that IMG have been brought into the sport because of their level of expertise, and that will not suit everybody. But at some point the sport has to say, we all need to move in a direction. And I just hope that they won't try and prevent it moving from a direction that inexorably it has to move in. But they are entitled, and we will hear their point of view.
They are very much given the floor. I'm sure there's something else I was going to mention, but now I can't remember.
Magazines out.
Magazines out. That's good.
Two controversial articles. One about transgender athletes and whether or not they should be banned from playing, and what is the data and research behind that allows that decision to be made. One about the likelihood over time of rugby league and rugby union coming together on the field to be played as rugby league.
I mean, it was very funny, wasn't it, when the BBC tweeted the Scottish fella scoring a try, and all the replies were
every week.
Tom Johnson, Tom Atkinson, some bloke who plays in League One you've never heard of. Brilliant. I mean, we do have a bit of a chip on our shoulders, but on that point, it's a well-deserved chip on our shoulders.
But also, I do think that people can read or disagree with the article. It's there as a thought-provoking talking point. This is the first time ever when we can talk about the product being rugby league, that rugby union has some issues it has to address, because litigation will force it to address it, that it almost has to be rugby league. And if it is, that puts us in a very different position historically to one that we've ever been in before.
The one question I forgot to ask our friends from Keighley,
who we haven't interviewed yet,
Kyle Garcia and Ryan O'Neill, was going to be, so what if you lose the vote? What do you do? Do you become a rugby union club?
No, they have
just stay with
they have to fall in line.
but here they are telling us about what they're going to do, and I can't remember how to introduce them. So if you're watching the programme live, you won't see it. If you listen to the podcast, you will. But if you are watching live, you'll see it later when I've edited it, because I've got to edit it. But yeah, thanks for watching or listening, and stay